Today we're updating our top 4 infantry pairs list with the release of CJ and Pakal, so stick around in this video for the very best infantry pairs and talents in Rise of Kingdoms. Hello my friends and welcome back, I'm Chisgule Gaming, and in this video, sponsored by the makers of Rise of Kingdoms, we've got to talk about the release of CJ and Pakal and the ways in which it has, or maybe really hasn't, changed what the best pairs are for infantry players in Rise of Kingdoms. Now, these are not rally combos. These are not garrison combos. This is all about open field goodness. Nice trades, a balance of being able to take some damage and dish it back out. This is not for situations where you're just being ignored. And then, I mean, like, of course, if your march is ignored, you're going to get a great trade because you're just doing a ton of damage to people. This is balanced, best marches, and a huge thank you in advance to the Infantry Rise of Kingdoms Discord. I'll have a link in the description of the video, also down in a pinned comment. You can check them out. At the end of this video, I always go there and check in to see kind of what they think the latest meta is before making a list like this. And you may know Ruz and Cortex, who run that group. They gave a lot of input to this, and I agree. I've changed around some of the ordering, but they'd say about the same. So let's get started here with actually the number 4 combo on the list. And after I run through these, I'll give you all the runners up and things I didn't mention. I'll talk a little bit about what I think the best all-infantry murder ball is, and what the single best infantry march is to bring. So we'll cover all of that. First up, number 4 on the list is sort of an oldie but goodie, and that's Alex paired with Harold. Ooh, this combo just is it does so much damage. If you ignore the Alex-Harold combo, it is going to do ridiculous amounts of damage, and both Alex and Harold have instant proc damage. That is so good for open field fighting. It's honestly ridiculous. Start swarming this march, and guess what? Harold starts doing AoE. His counterattack is outrageous. The only thing that this combo is really missing is a way to capitalize on the fact that Stamford Bridge qualifies as an active skill. So if you had a primary commander that had, say, the healing ability from the defense tree, or rejuvenate from either the support tree or from the skill tree, you would be getting that effect, the generation of rage or the healing. Even the leadership tree gives you a nice little defense boost if you get those talents. So unfortunately, with the Alex primary, you don't get the benefit of having some talents that trigger by virtue of Stamford Bridge triggering, but the instant proc damage and offensive punch of this march, along with the utility of the Alexander the Great, lands this thing very solidly in number 4. And if you were wondering what talents do I use on Alexander the Great, here is one build that I really like. There is very little that I would change about this potentially. Here's a variant where I swapped just a very small amount of points to get more march speed. In fact, I only did 1 point. I mean, I took 1 point, okay, out of health, and I put it in a march speed. I don't know. This is like, I wouldn't change a thing here, okay? The thing that I do want to mention that sometimes people are like, oh, I don't know if I should get this talent, is Fight to the Death. This is a must-get talent. It is the best talent in the attack tree, potentially. I mean, every time I just add this talent to a build, I do better without failure. And I get that if you were getting swarmed into oblivion, this is probably worse, but I don't know. I have found I always do better with this talent. You should get this. Enough about Alex Harold, who we've covered before, and I really think he's very strong. I want to give another Alex combo. This is number 3 on the list. It does involve the new commander. This is actually the only new commander you're going to see on my top list, although we'll talk about that in just a bit. And that's Alex primary with a CJ secondary. Now, look, CJ and Harold are actually extremely similar, and they're in many ways sort of two sides of the same coin. They're all about doing damage. That's all they do is damage. And that's in some ways unfortunate because, I don't know, if there was some unique utility, like Ramses removes all healing, or a debuff of some kind that one of them was bringing, that would be pretty cool. They're unique in different ways, but they both have instant proc damage. They both do AoE damage in different ways. And, you know, okay, CJ's gimmick is that he hits low health targets to do more damage, right? So if you're using this march with Alex CJ, you want to pick the lower target marches. You want to be near a big fight where you're taking AoE damage, but not the focus of the damage, because then you get some AoE damage back when you have him expertise, which is absolutely phenomenal. This pair is very strong. I'd like to get my hands on it. In fact, I'm working toward using this eventually on my restart project. I could test with it a little bit if I wanted in this upcoming KVK, and I probably will. But I think the Alex CJ is very strong. The Infantry Discord actually put this combo with the CJ at number 4 and the Alex Herald above it. I flipped them around because I actually think there's a little bit of value to the proactive nature of sort of CJ's AoE damage, right? Like, all you have to do is take some skill damage, which is going to happen in a big fight, and CJ starts doing AoE, whereas Herald actually has to get targeted to start doing that. I mean, it's just a strong march. I would use it if I had it. I don't have CJ maxed yet. I'm going to work on him from the wheel. Because he doesn't have some unique utility, I feel like I can wait on maxing this commander. Call me crazy. Up next is number 2 on the list, and in many ways, number 2 and number 1, you've seen them before. They are not exactly interchangeable, but they're both very strong for slightly different reasons, and they are going to be Guan combos. And of course, I mean, I'll call them out at the same time here. My number 2 is going to be Guan Alex, and my number 1 is going to be Guan Leo. Previously, I had them flipped around, and now I've got Leo at number 1 and Alex at number 2, and let me explain kind of what's going on here. So now the Guan Alex combo is powerful because it has a lot of mobility, ton of march speed coming from Alex. You've got the utility of the shields, which hopefully will at some point, if you've got enough rage generation, align with the active skill of Guan Yu. If not Guan Yu, maybe you get an instant proc from Alex, which, by the way, I love about Guan Alex. Instant procs are magical for open field fighting. Not only do you do a ton of damage, you've got the utility here of the healing reduction, and then that's just amazing from Alexander the Great. I mean, the combo is very strong, and the reason that I think that while Alex as a secondary is very good, Leonidas is a stronger pair is that, quite frankly, the Leonidas paired with Guan gives you a lot of survivability. And people are, I mean, I say they've figured it out, but I think people are still figuring out that Guan, with his silence effect, is so savage that you have to attack the Guan. It is a very high priority target. Okay, one of the first things that people should focus out is Guan, because the silence is just reducing damage potentially. And Guan has no defenses, which is where Leo comes into play. Alex is nice. He sometimes gives you defense. He's giving you occasional shields. That's nice. The Leonidas sustain, however, is very meaningful. Health, also defense. Speed of rage gained means your silences are happening more frequently, which is amazing. Also, your damage is boosted because, presumably, this is not necessarily the case, but if your AoE hits the same targets as the Guan, you're going to do more damage to them. Leonidas is, paired with Guan, in my opinion, the number 1 infantry pair that is just so powerful. One of the huge upsides of Leonidas is that you get the majority of his power with a 5-5-1-5, because you're not trying to stay in open field fights till you get below 50%. At that point, you probably ought to be backing off anyways, so only if your march is getting heavily focused. And often, by the way, when people see you've got a Leo secondary to the Guan, they pick something even more squishy. They realize, like, hey, this is not taking as much damage as it should, as quickly as it should, and they switch to something else. That commonly happens. So I think that a 5-5-1-5 Leo is just, like, amazing. But the downside of Leo is he's really designed to be used with Guan, and, like, you pair them together. And I don't know that there's a lot of other great, like, top-tier homes for Leo. I'm not saying he's bad. I'm just saying, like, this is the best combo. As far as talents go for Guan, I'll just give you 2 builds very quickly that I really like. Here is the open field build that I've been using in KVK. In fact, if you want to see this in action, I'll have a card up in the top. You can check that out. But the other build that I can recommend for Canyon, where you don't need the march speed, is this one over here. And if you're really, a tough player here and you want to just say, you know what, I don't care about the march speed, I don't need to slow enemies or get away from fights, then you can use this build in KVK. I actually think it's stronger once you are in combat, but I think for most people, manipulating the enemy's march speed is kind of important. Getting your own march speed, especially if you're using that Leonidas pairing, is pretty important. So you can make your own choices there. 2 really great builds, which now we need to talk about. Whoa, where was Pakal? Why is CJ not listed in more combos? And what about Trajan? Trajan Herald is an infantry march, and that's actually the number 5 combo on my list, except it was a top 4 list. That's a thing I've been doing. Trajan Herald, it's just amazing. I've used it a ton. I absolutely love this combo. I was mentioning earlier that the Stamford Bridge ability is going to proc Strategic Prowess, giving you 20% defense. It is going to trigger Rejuvenate, giving you 150 Rage. Trajan Herald is a freaking magical combo. You use it, you do damage, you buff a ton. It's absolutely fantastic. 10 out of 10 would recommend. But there are some high damage combos I didn't mention that you're probably wondering, Chisgule, where are these on your list? The first of those is, of course, with Guan again, and either CJ or Herald. And the reality is that if you ignore Guan CJ, if you ignore Guan Herald, you're going to get just really great trades, just like you would with any march that gets completely ignored. The real question is, when they get focused, then what happens, right? Then how do you do? What happens to your trades? And I don't know, maybe that's maybe I'm optimizing for the wrong thing. For me personally, I would take the Guan Leo or the Guan Alex over Guan CJ and Guan Herald any day of the week. And that's in part because I think the CJ and Herald can elevate commanders like Martel, can elevate commanders like Alexander the Great to be even more deadly, whereas Guan is already plenty deadly, and I just think he needs a little something to stay alive, okay? My 2 cents on that one. I think they're fine combos if you're using them. That's great. And I personally will be using Guan CJ, Alex Esong, and Trajan Ethel on my restart. So I'm pairing Guan with CJ in my next KVK because that's what I'm going to have on my restart. You're not going to want to miss that, so subscribe if you haven't already. So those high damage combos are very strong, no doubt about it. There are other very balanced combos that I think will trade very well that we just need to talk about briefly here. One is Pakal Primary, using either CJ or Herald. Like I said, these damage engines are sort of interchangeable in some ways. I think the advantage of Herald as a secondary to Pakal is that Stamford Bridge will trigger medicinal supplies, giving you just a ton of sustain between the shields and the healing and the counterattack. Like, you're very difficult to deal with. Similarly, you could use Martel with CJ or Herald, right? So now you could switch it up to a Martel primary. This combo I've talked about a lot with Herald specifically, but I think it also works with CJ. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. It's going to do really well in the field. You're going to do a lot of damage. People are going to ignore you. By virtue of being ignored, you're going to do a lot of damage. I like Pakal with CJ over Martel with CJ. And the main reason that I feel that way is that, look, CJ is boosting damage a little bit. Okay, he's got a skill damage boost. You may as well enjoy that a little bit by using that with Pakal, who also does skill damage. Martel doesn't do that. Okay, it micro optimization, but that's how I would mix that up. Now, absent from this list, and they're solid, but just not meta, is commanders like Richard I and Constantine. And it's just because they don't do enough to protect the marches that are being focused down. Okay, that's my opinion. Other people might say differently. I know some folks that swear by Richard and Alex. I know some folks that swear by Constantine and Mulan. Bring those to the battlefield, and they do very well. I'm not saying that those combos do poorly. I'm saying that in a world in which I like to bring all must-answer threats, which, by the way, the more people in my kingdom bring must-answer threats, the less any of us gets just, like, completely focused, right? Because everybody's got something that you have to attack, so, like, which one do you hit first is a little bit more tricky of a question to answer. But in a world in which there's, like, 50 Constantines in one Esong primary, you're going to go target the Esong, right? So anyways, I'm not saying that a Constantine combo and a Richard combo, that they will trade poorly necessarily. I'm just saying they're not really quite meta at this moment in time. In fact, if you were to make an all-infantry murder ball, here's what I would do at this moment in time. And I talked about this in a recent video, but I've got a refinement on it. In that video, we proved that there's some real advantage to going all in on one unit type. So if you did that with infantry, my recommendation to you will be that you use, first of all, the Trajan with Ethel combo. Very powerful, both of those commanders. Just very solid. Everybody gets the Ethel. Players that have more marches on the field should be considering someone like Trajan. Or if they just want to be a team player and you're in big group fights, Trajan is really fantastic. I would use as a second march Guan Leo. I mentioned that it's extremely strong. You should pair them together. Yeah, use the number one combo. The second or I guess the third combo I would bring is Alex paired with CJ. Okay, that's the number 3 on my list, the Alex CJ. I think it's really great. A lot of damage. CJ is boosting the skill damage from Alex. I think that's really fantastic. And the 4th pair I would bring in this all-infantry murder ball isn't, again, it's sort of an oldie-ish but goodie, and that's the Martel with Herald. Love this combo. It's going to be the last one you have alive on the field, potentially. It just does a lot of damage and kind of gets ignored. And when it's ignored, you don't do your AoE. Kind of sucks, but you get a ton of stacks on your Herald. You do a lot of damage, okay? A lot of attack out of that. And the final combo, if you're bringing an all skill damage murder ball, is actually, and this is my refinement from the last time I shared what this list would be. I think it would be Pakal with Sun Tzu. And I know it's like, no Richard the First, really? Yeah, I don't think so. I think you want the Sun Tzu AoE damage. Sun Tzu is going to boost the damage to Pakal as well on his active skill. Pakal gives you a lot of tankiness. People will see you have a Sun Tzu. They're going to focus you. Guess what? They have fallen for the trap. You do a bunch of skill damage taken or all damage taken reduction and also a bunch of counterattack damage back. Gotcha, baby. I think Pakal Sun Tzu is a great pair. The other thing that I've seen people do is that Constantine Mulan. Really solid choice as the 5th march for your all-infantry murder ball. And as we proved in our previous video, the advantage of bringing all one troop type is you're getting the city skin, you're getting the special unit, you're getting all the stat bonuses on every one of your marches, and that can swing a trade about 5,000 sev wounds in your favor, according to our testing. Although I think we need to do more testing of that to really, truly understand the implications, right? We'll do a full gear test at some point not too far in the future. Now, if you are going to bring only one infantry march, following the guidance I shared in my previous video where I said, hey, you kind of want to focus. There's some advantage to that. I think the one march you bring is not Guan Leonidas. Not that Guan Leo is bad. In fact, I think that's a great combo. But if you're bringing a murder ball that's not mostly infantry and you're bringing only one infantry march, I mean, I think the answer is probably Guan with Alex. And that is just because of all of the utility that Alexander the Great is going to be bringing. Also because Alexander the Great kind of has the march speed to keep up with whatever other murder ball you're running. Infantry are slower than any other unit type. So having the Alexander the Great march speed, the shielding on your Guan and a nearby low health unit, and the healing reduction, and the all damage taken boost to targets nearby, like, yeah, I think Guan Alex is the one infantry march that you would bring if you're only bringing one infantry march. The final thing I want to talk about in this video, just very briefly, is equipment. And, you know, I've covered this in a number of videos demonstrating, in fact, it was almost a year ago, that there are diminishing returns on having lots of stats, which means that because of alliance technology and because of the Season of Conquest giving all attack, health is going to be the highest priority stat for pretty much every infantry combo you're putting together, followed by defense, and you kind of want to avoid attack. So for an account that's like really souped up, I mean, yeah, this is an endgame configuration that you would be looking for, but what's the more reasonable along the way path? There's a couple pieces here that are super high value that are probably the last ones that you upgrade from, and we need to talk about that. The first is the Gatekeeper Shield. Absolutely phenomenal, gives health, special talent this, you get a bunch of health, and you can avoid, for some amount of time, going for a talented Sakura Fubuki or going for a legendary weapon. Like, you can stick with the Gatekeeper Shield. I do that. You can see I'm using it on my Trajan, and I think that's a totally fine choice. Although Trajan, you could make an argument that he might want to attack anyways. And the other piece that you really can, like, save a lot of materials and deploy other places and just get the majority of the value you're going to get is the Karak's Humility, giving also with talent 10.5% health. This is absolutely phenomenal. Stick with those pieces, update those last. And as the other pieces that you might start to think about, where do I want to get epics and what legendaries to go for? I will say, as far as boots go, don't ignore the Scarlet Hounds for a time. You might really enjoy the full health benefit that these give, especially when you talent them. It's pretty solid compared to other options. But once you start looking into epics and legendaries, I just want to call your attention to the fact that the 2-piece infantry set bonus is really good. The 2-piece bonus gives you 3% defense. So if we just get a look at the legendary set really quickly, between all of these items that you could make, I think the best items to be making is going to be some combination of these two. It's going to be boots gloves, or the helmet. And I'll call attention to the fact that if you will at some point make a KVK helmet, that also has defense. So I personally went with the gloves and the boots on my main account. On my restart, where I don't know when I'm going to get the KVK helmet, right? So I went with the helmet, and I'm going to make the gloves, and I'm just using Shio's return for boots, and I'm going to try to talent those eventually. So that is what I would be thinking about for armor, especially if you consider the legendary set. I think the 2-piece bonus really good. Sticking with these defense-oriented pieces, I think, is really good, right? Keep the Gatekeeper's Shield for some amount of time. And if you do go to the 4-piece bonus, one option there is to do the helmet, the gloves, the boots, and then you do have to weave in one piece that has attack. I think the obvious choice is to go with the weapon at that point. The reason is that it's just a pretty healthy stat gain over the Gatekeeper's Shield at that point. It's like twice as many stats. If you talent it, I mean, it's amazing. And the 10% march speed is undeniably good. So getting that 4-piece bonus, saving the legs. Don't make the legs, right? You can just stick with the Karox epic piece there is really good. Chest piece, unfortunately, you're looking at attack for that piece over here on Quinn's Soul. That's the best that you can do until eventually you make your way up to a Hope Cloak, which has defense, which I think is a pretty solid pickup in advance or above and beyond this piece right over here, the Quinn's Soul. Now, if you were starting Rise of Kingdoms from day one and you said, Chisgule, I'm going to be an infantry player and this is how it's going to be, then my recommendation for your Legendary Commander investment order, if you are free to play or very low spend, will be to start with Alexander the Great. You're going to have to wait a while till his wheel shows up. You do Alexander the Great, then you do Guan, then you do a 5/5/1/1 Leo, and then you pick either CJ or Herald, and you are like off to the freaking races with some amazing infantry commanders. I think that's a great way to start. If you are a higher spender, then you could be looking at combinations that involve Richard as well at the start. So you'd get Richard at the start, so you've got something in KVK 1, right? You'd also be looking at Alexander the Great. Then once you get to Season of Conquest, right, you've got to get Guan very quickly. I think at this moment in time in the game, he's just undeniably powerful and regarded by just about everybody as the single best infantry open field commander in the game. So you go for Guan, you get a Leonidas, whether you max him or not is kind of your call, and then you invest in one of the all-damage commanders that I was just talking about. And something you could do with your Richard is even like Richard Ethel is pretty decent in the early game. That's something that you could definitely consider. And you don't have to have a max Richard, even though he is really strong. If you started with a unmaxed Richard and you did like 5/5/1/1 or 5/5/5/1, I think that also would serve you pretty well until you're ready to kind of move past him. And that's my only caution with an investment in a commander like Richard is that, like, I've moved away from him. Other people in my kingdom that do very well in KVK are still using him and still feel like he's top tier. So take that for what you will, okay? There's a lot of thoughts around which commanders are the very best and how long you can use them. I'll point out that the damage reduction effect that's AoE from Richard is pretty solid, undeniably. So he is still a solid commander, but he's just not quite where I want to be for clearing the field of enemies as fast as I possibly can. If you found this video helpful or learned something new, throw a like on here and consider subscribing. My Discord server is discord.gg/Chisgule. Thanks again to the Infantry Rock Discord. Their link is in the description and also the pinned comment, so you can go check them out for all infantry all the time. It's a infantry dedicated Discord. And if you want to see any of the commanders or combos that we've been talking about in some 1v1 testing, I'll have a card up in the top that you can check out where we tested Pakal, we tested CJ, and if what you want to see is just all of these recommendations I've been making deployed in the field for hours on end, I'll have a card up in the top as well in that little info button with some KVK fighting that you're not going to want to miss. Until next time, you have fun smashing the kingdom.